Hello all, welcome to the DevOps course. My name is Kastro. I am an AWS and DevOps trainer. As we have already discussed in the previous video, this DevOps course has been divided into two modules. In the module 1, DevOps curriculum will be covered, and in module 2, DevOps lab will be covered. In this video, we are going to focus on module 1, starting with the very first unit that is available in the JNTU syllabus. Especially, this video will be focusing on three major points as an introduction towards the understanding of DevOps. So we will see the introduction part, and then we will understand a concept called SDLC, and we will also see what are the different SDLC methodologies that are available. Coming to the introduction point of view, suppose let's take a scenario here in order to understand the concept clearly. So assume that a person is there and he got an idea saying that he wants to start an e-commerce application. Now, whenever a person gets an idea to start a web application or a website or a mobile application, so the first thing what the person has to do is he has to go and meet a software company. So once he goes and meets in the software company, he is going to discuss his idea of developing the e-commerce application with the software people. Now, once the software people gets an idea about the requirements of the client, then the project will be signed with the client, and then the project will be take over. Now, once the project takes over, what is the project here? The project is to develop the e-commerce application. Now, in order to develop any software project, there should be an amalgamation of multiple teams. Now, coming to this particular project, we need multiple teams. So teams such as the development team, the operations team, and the database team, and also the testing team. Apart from these teams, there will also be multiple other teams that will be involved in the development of project. Now, coming to the development team, which is the first team. So the development team consists of developers. So what is the duty of developers? The duty of developers is to understand the requirement of the clients, and according to the requirements of the client, they have to write the code with respect to the application point of view. Once the code is successfully developed, this development team will give the code to the operations team. Here comes the DevOps technology. But here it is too early to understand the DevOps, but assume that once the code is written by the developers, developers will give that code to the IT operations team. Now, what is the function of IT operations team? The function of IT operations team is to deploy that code into the servers. Now, once the code is successfully deployed, the next team that comes is the database team. So the role of database team is to maintain the user data. Once the user data is maintained in the database team, then we can say that the entire application is successfully deployed into the servers. Now, once the application is successfully deployed, people will look for the application in the real-time scenarios. Suppose if the end users are facing any problems, those problems will be identified by the testing team. So the role of testing team will go in two different ways. The first way is once the developers writes the code, the testing team will test the code to find if there are any bugs that are available in the code. Now, assume that the testing team had found that there are no bugs that are available with the code, whatever is given by the developers. Now, once the testing team gives the approval, the IT operations team will deploy that code into the servers. Now, after deploying the code into the servers, the end users will be able to access the application, whatever the client is having an idea. Now, during the process of end users accessing the application, sometimes there might be downfall in the application. That downtime could be because of multiple reasons. One such reason that commonly knows is if the databases or if the servers are not properly established, then there will be a downtime to the application. That is what we mostly see when an exam results are released. So suppose if you consider this scenario, whenever the exam results are released, we know that whatever the site that we are looking for our exam result, that site will get downtime. What is the reason for that downtime? Multiple requests will be going to the server at the same time. Now, when multiple requests are going to the servers at the same time, the servers may not be able to handle such requests. So now, in order to take care of the additional requests that are coming to the servers, we need the help of the operations team. Like this, multiple teams will be working together in the process of developing an application and deploying that application into the servers. Now, the question is, what are the different ways of developing an application? So that takes us to a concept called software development lifecycle, which is SDLC. So what is this software development lifecycle? If you see it very clearly, this software development lifecycle can be visualized with a pattern of cake making. Suppose, let's say, if you want to make a cake. So what are the different steps that are involved? First, you have to gather the required items, and then you have to prepare the batter, and then you have to prepare the required, you have to add some additional materials. And once you add the additional materials, or flavored materials, then you are going to get the final cake or the final output. Cake is our output, and the materials that are required to prepare the cake is the entire requirement of the project. So here cake is our project, and the gathering of all the requirements and preparation of the cake is the final output. Now this entire process is called as software development lifecycle. So in simple terms, if we have to talk about what is a software development lifecycle, it is basically a roadmap to the final output or to get the final output for our project. So software development lifecycle is a methodology with clearly defined process. So what does I mean by clearly defined process? It means what are the required materials that you need in order to prepare a cake. Now, how many members are required in order to prepare the cake? What kind of additional materials, that is, what kind of kitchen utensils you need, what kind of ovens you need, what temperature of oven you need. So that is called as requirements gathering. So you have the clearly defined process in order to bake the cake. So similarly, in a software project also, SDLC is nothing but it is a methodology with a clearly defined process in order to get the final output of our project. So it basically involves a series of stages. Okay, it basically involves a series of stages. So if you see the cake making pattern, you can see there are 5 different stages. So stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and stage 5. So like this, we have 5 different stages here. Similarly, in the process of developing a software project has to undergo a series of stages. So what is the first stage? The first stage is gathering of the requirements. What would be the final stage? The final stage is deploying that application into the servers and maintaining the application into the servers. That's the whole stages of the software project, any software project. The very first stage will be the requirements gathering or the requirements analysis, and the very last stage would be the final output of the project, that is deployment and maintenance of the project. So that's why software development lifecycle is something which involves a series of stages. So what is the advantage of having this software development lifecycle for a project? The advantage is we'll be clearly knowing what are the different stages that are involved and what should be the resources that one has to invest in each stage. So that's the clearly defined process. So it basically offers us an overview of what it takes to create a software project. So on a large scale, if you want to know what are the requirements that you need, how many people you need, what kind of developers you need, what kind of engineers you need for a project. So that is all about the overview of what it takes to create a software project. Now, what are the different phases that are involved in the software development lifecycle? So basically, any software project has 7 different phases. The very first stage is the planning phase. So what will happen in the planning phase? Once the client comes and discusses with the software engineers or the IT company, then the required engineers or the engineers who are going to work on the project, they are going to plan it. In the planning stage, we will decide what kind of programming languages we need to have in order to develop this application, how many resources we need, what kind of resources we need, do we need any cloud computing services or cloud computing models. So that's all about the planning stage. Once the planning is successfully completed, then comes the requirements gathering. Requirements gathering is nothing but how many people are required, what kind of qualities or what kind of talent those requirements should have. That's the requirement phase. Once the requirements are finalized, then comes the design phase. So basically, in the design phase, what actually involves is how the user interface of an application should look like. So that's the design phase. Once the design is finalized, then the coding will take place according to the design phase. So whatever the design that we need, according to the design phase, then developers will start writing the code. Once the coding part gets completed, then comes the test of the coding. Whatever the code that is written by the developers, we cannot directly deploy that code into the servers. What is the problem of deploying the code into the servers without testing? Sometimes the code might work, sometimes the code might not work. So it is always important, once the developers writes the code, the testing team should test the code and they should certify whether the code is ready to deploy or if there are any bugs that are available. Suppose if the testing team finds that there are bugs that are available in the code, again the testing team will communicate the same thing to the developers. So what developers has to do, wherever the bugs are available, they have to fix the bugs and again they have to send the code to the testing team. So testing team will again test for the bugs, and once testing team certifies that there are no bugs that are available in the code written by the developers, then comes the next phase, which is the deployment phase. So now, once the code is tested successfully, and if there are no bugs that are found, the code will be deployed into the servers. Now, how will you deploy the code into the servers? So there are two methods of deploying the code into the servers. One method is called as on-premises, and the second method is called as cloud-based models. Now, in the cloud-based models, we have different cloud service providers such as AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. We also have the GCP, that is Google Cloud Platform, and we also have third service provider, which is called as Microsoft Azure. Apart from these three cloud computing providers or cloud service providers, we also have some private clouds as well. So once the code is successfully deployed into the servers, there cannot end the project phase. Once the code is deployed, it is also the duty of the IT company to maintain that project for a standard duration of time. So once the maintenance period gets completed, then the contract goes down. And again, if the client wants, they will retrieve the contract back or they will renew the contract back. So these are the 7 different phases that are involved in the software development lifecycle, starting from planning phase, requirements gathering, design phase, coding phase, testing phase, deployment phase, and the maintenance phase. These are the 7 phases of SDLC. Now, the question here comes is, in how many ways we can develop a software project? What are the different ways that are available, or what are the different methodologies that are available in the real-time market? So that takes us to the next concept, which is called as SDLC methodologies. That's called as software development lifecycle methodologies, or some will call it as SDLC models as well. Models or methodologies, they both refer to the same scenario. Now let's see what are the different methodologies that are available in order to develop a software project. So the first and the oldest methodology is called as waterfall model. Then comes the iterative model, and then comes V model, which is verification and validation model, and then comes the spiral model, and then the agile model, and then the scrum model, and the Kanban model. So these are the 7 different models that are available in order to develop a software project. Again, here Scrum and Kanban are something which are related to the Agile model only. They are not a separate methodologies. Scrum and Kanban, they belong to Agile model itself. But as a part of this course, we are going to focus on 4 major methodologies that are available in the SDLC. Starting with waterfall model, we will jump directly to the Agile model, and then in the Agile model, I'll be talking about Scrum and Kanban models as well. So these are the 4 different methodologies that we are going to focus. But as a part of your curriculum, waterfall model is not included, but here I'll be covering the waterfall model just to make you understand how the waterfall model will work and what are the advantages and disadvantages of waterfall model and why there was a requirement to develop the agile model when we have the previous versions of waterfall model or iterative model, V model or spiral model. So when we already have the old versions of the software development methodologies, why we need to go for the agile model and what are the advantages that are available in the agile model when we compare with the other four models. So these are the four things that we are going to discuss. In the next session, we'll be talking about each one of these models individually. But one thing that we should note is DevOps is something which does not belong to any of the SDLC methodologies or SDLC models. DevOps is completely a different aspect when you compare with the SDLC methodologies. However, DevOps concepts we'll be covering in the upcoming videos. Thank you. We'll meet in the next session.